Hello everyone, it's Kate from Sleep Time Consulting. I am here today. It's Wednesday. It's sunny outside. Not too windy, not raining. It's May, and that's all you can hope for is the bit of good weather. So today I'm here to talk to you with the allergy health coach, live all about allergies. So I have just seen that she started watching, so I'm just going to try and get her to come on board. There we go, there's the request. Add her in. So thank you for joining so far. Look forward to chatting soon. It's all going to work in a second. Always have confidence in these things. Hi, how you doing?
Hello. Good, how are you?
Yes, yeah, just had that moment of, is it going to work? Yes, it has. So it's always fine. You just need to have that confidence, doesn't it? So
yeah. Totally. It's good when it works and then not so good when it doesn't. But...
Absolutely, yeah. But thank you so much for joining me today. It's I didn't quite realise when we arranged this date that it was weaning week, which actually is kind of going to be an interesting sort of topic maybe to touch on, because I remember back when my two were little, weaning was always one of those really stressful things, and I had an experience which we'll talk about in terms of allergies with there, so it'd be great to kind of touch on that. But yeah, thank you very much. And on a Wednesday I do like these informative talks, so you've slotted in really perfectly, so brilliant.
Thank you for having me.
No problem. But do you want to just start off by telling us a little bit about yourself and kind of what you do? That'd be great to understand to begin with.
Yeah, so I am Erica, and my business is the Allergy Health Coach. And the reason I started my business was because of my two boys, who are now, I'm trying to remember the ages, Jack's 7 and Ollie's 5. And both of them have multiple allergies, including anaphylaxis to nuts as well. And when, I've been kind of, I guess, coaching in various guises throughout my kind of adult career. And, more recently I'm an antenatal practitioner and a hypnobirthing practitioner. So I've always loved working with parents and their babies and pregnancy and all those kind of things. But when I had my boys, we had a really, really rough start to parenthood. Both of them really struggled to begin with. There were lots of crying, rashes, all sorts of issues, tongue-tie, reflux. And it took a really long time for anybody to listen to me and to actually hear that we needed support. I think with Jack, we went through around 6 doctors before somebody took me seriously. And it was just a battle from day one, and it kind of fueled me. I got to the point where I thought, why are parents not getting the support that they need? Why do doctors not know more about what's going on, or at least if they don't know, why they're not signposting you to somebody who does know? And I was getting lots of friends of friends of friends who were contacting me about their own children's allergies. And I think because my boys still have all of theirs, we're still living with it, people that were trying to get help from me. And I thought one day, I was like, do you know what? The support that I've been looking for, I can't find. So I'm going to become that support. I'm going to make that my business and make it official, create that business and offer that helping hand that so many parents need, especially during kind of COVID and things, and appointments have been really hard to get. So many parents are feeling overwhelmed and stressed and anxious. And you don't want to be like that in motherhood and parenthood is tough at the best of times. It's such a roller coaster. And I thought, can I take away some of that anxiety and create that kind of calm and create strategies and plans to help parents feel confident. And, I'm not replacing the dietitian. I'm not replacing the healthcare professionals at all. I'm there alongside, helping the mums and dads to get the information that they're comfortable with and kind of putting it into a bit of a plan, because often the healthcare professionals help the baby, but there's not really anyone helping the parents when they go back home. So I think kind of bringing all of that together, just to offer that support blanket, really.
I think there's a massive value in that. I mean, I've seen a couple of things. This is complete non-parallel sort of business, but I know someone who set up as your divorce coach, and it's a similar sort of thought process. Like, you've got solicitors out there, you've got kind of professionals that deal with an area, but no one helps the individual through that process. And it's like, I mean, we're going through a bit of investigations for my daughter, so we go and see the consultant, and I come away from it going, I don't really know everything you've just told me, because I'm not an expert in that area. You've sort of spoken to me as a consultant, and it's not necessarily easily to understand. So having someone like you to be able to go, okay, I've been through a lot of this, obviously with your sons, and if you haven't, you've got the understanding and probably the research to back it all up. It's having a friendly face, isn't it, and someone to rely on, I'm sure. So yeah. Oh,
I think it's that consistency as well. It's you know, there's so much information out there, and you think, where, you know, what do I trust? Where do I go for the information? How do I read it? How do I make sense of it? And you know, a lot of my packages my coaching packages is that ongoing messaging support that, you know, if a parent reads something, or even if, you know, recently I had a mum who was off to hospital with a baby who was having a reaction, and I spent the next hour just messaging each other backwards and forwards, and giving her that support to speak to the doctor and ask the right questions, and just even tell her to hug her husband, you know, because you're so focused on your child. You know, those bits sounds simple, but it makes such a difference to the experience. And then, you know, how do we then process that experience and we learn from it, so that next time, if God forbid it does happen again, you're much more better prepared, and all those kind of things. So,
because there's a lot of anxiety, you know, that comes with, you know, having an allergic reaction, and you know, you can't think straight necessarily, and actually having that kind of support, or knowing the questions to ask, or perhaps the challenges to make, you know, because obviously our instincts are often, you know, so powerful, but actually you need to just have the, you know, kind of the courage of your convictions to be able to do that. So yeah, it's a great kind of service. Oh, fab. Well, that's a great kind of intro. So yeah, I admire you for doing it. I mean, gosh, it's one of those pockets where, and I think when I saw you pop up, because you did a MUSH talk, didn't you, last couple of weeks ago, and I was like, oh, and I check them all each week to go, oh, what are they talking about? And a lot of them are you know, kind of really great sort of baby classes, and it just stood out. I thought, this is really interesting. So yeah, it's a great idea. So I mean, one of the things that I think would be really interesting to well, for me to understand a bit more about, but also, you know, kind of for my followers, for my kind of clients, is just understanding a little bit more about I suppose the allergies, and whether you know, whether we're kind of not born with them, but what to look out for, like the expectations around this. And there's, I think, as I sort of mentioned to you when we were chatting before, that, you know, kind of when I see a lot of people disturbed with sleep, it often comes down to they're diagnosing it as reflux, and actually that can be a big issue, but sometimes I think it's given this label quite quickly. And then actually back in the day, so my kids are well, my oldest is 11 and my youngest is 8, so when they were born, reflux was a very hard thing to get to be diagnosed. It was very much an unknown thing, and it was a real, I suppose, a real in-depth diagnosis that would get you to a point. I'm finding these days that a lot of doctors are just diagnosing reflux and giving medication quite quickly. And I often think that it's not about that, but I'm not qualified enough to say that. And I wonder whether your thoughts on that kind of, that early part. So we're talking about, you know, kind of babies and, you know, breastfed babies probably, and no, actually also bottle fed babies as well. And the relationship with allergies around that age, if you've got any thoughts or advice.
I have the same thoughts as you, is that there's kind of that, let's put a plaster on it, give you some medication, and then hopefully things will settle. All I hear is omeprazole, Gaviscon, which, you know, those are great when they're used and when they need to be, but Gaviscon, I think, it does cause constipation, and omeprazole can disturb sleep and things. So it's not the be all and end all. It's not the immediate fix that probably some parents would like. Equally, it's trying to get to the root cause of it. I think that's the key. That yes, some babies have reflux because they have reflux, but it's trying to look back at the child's history and looking at a really holistic approach, so that it's taking into account what mum's instincts are telling her, because that in itself is crucial. It's trying to work out kind of sleep patterns, and what mum is, if she's breastfeeding, what mum is eating, what you know, what else is going on, and trying to work out, you know, even down to the point where a baby's birth, if it's a really quick birth, a really fast birth, and you know, when I ask parents if they're like, oh, it was like 12 hours long, I'm like, no, I just mean the last bit. It was that last bit really, really quick. or was it a cesarean, or was it a forceps birth? That can have a really big impact on the baby's digestion and
Yes.
you know, their muscles, and how they then feed when, you know, the tongue's not working properly because their muscles are tight. You know, there's loads and loads of things, and not just necessarily that they've got reflux. It just kind of a bit of a by symptom. So I think when it comes to allergies and for parents trying to work out what's going on, the really tricky thing is that I think for new parents, they don't know what is normal for a baby. Yes, babies cry, that's how they communicate with us. But it's trying to find the patterns, trying to find the things that if mum's breastfeeding, what is she eating that your baby's then unsettled because of that, or if there's a reflux flare up, or eczema, or nappies turn a bit yucky, those kind of things. So I always suggest to parents to keep a food and symptom diary, as detailed as possible. And it's putting in things like, again, if mum's breastfeeding, what mum's eating, what she's drinking, what medication the child is on, what their sleep patterns are like. Take pictures of their nappies, which I know sounds gross, but get as much information as possible, because then when you do go to your GP, you can say, look, this is the information I have. One, you don't have to remember it, because, you know, we're all sleep deprived anyway. But two, you've got it all written down, you've got the evidence, and you're more likely to be taken seriously then as well. It's not just, you know, they can't fob you off with you're a first time mum, you're going a bit crazy, you're just sleep deprived, all those things that I was definitely told when I first started. God, my house is like freezing, I'm shivering, sorry. Like I can hear my voice, I'm like, oh, it's warmer outside, I think. So it's putting together that food and symptom diary and just keeping it really thorough, keeping it up to date. So putting it like on the kitchen table, somewhere where it's obvious that you can quickly just jot down. So it's not a mammoth task at the end of each day.
Make it, It's like a sleep diary, isn't it? It's exactly. You just want to quick jot it down and make it. You know. Someone's just asked about why omeprazole can disturb sleep. I don't know the exact. I could guess at an answer for this, but I'd let if you know.
I'm trying to think of the exact thing. I only know this because it disturbed my son's sleep when he came off it. He was 100 times better. It is used to try and help with sleep because, you know, they say to give it to a baby before they go to sleep at night, because they're lying down, the reflux comes back up, all those kind of things. But there's something in it that does. I don't know. You probably more informed. Go on.
Yeah, I mean, I think that from my point of view, when we talk about omeprazole and we talk about was it lansoprazole? I can never say that one. And ranitidine, which one of them's off the market now. Is it ranitidine?
Ranitidine,
yeah, which was the one that everyone kind of went to. Is that you're putting something into their system that's not natural, and we're often talking about very tiny babies here. And I'm not saying that it shouldn't happen. It's just it's the balance, isn't it, of the gut microbe, you know. And I've learned a lot about this over the years myself. And again, it's one of those things we didn't really talk about, but so much is controlled by the gut, and especially kind of restful periods as well. So, this is more of not a direct answer to the question, but I think if you're putting in something like omeprazole, antibiotics, anything that isn't, you know, within the baby's natural world, and in those first sort of 6 months we're talking about, you know, formula or breast milk, it's worth balancing it out, I think, with something like a good probiotic, just to help them to kind of settle, because otherwise you can get into the constipation type thing, you can get into, you know, what is the omeprazole actually doing. And I suppose, again, if you get down the route of we're slightly getting into more medical territory that I'm comfortable with, but if you're being prescribed omeprazole for what is an allergy rather than a reflux issue, is it going to actually help, or is it going to actually make the situation worse? Which is, you know, when I talk to parents about sleep and reflux, I'm like, we don't do sleep training unless you're non-symptomatic, because otherwise you're fighting the wrong battle here. You need to go back and get yourself sorted on that basis. But going back to the kind of sorry.
Go on.
No, I was going to say, going back to the kind of the analysis, I think, you know, once you can kind of package all that information up and take it to your GP, that's when you can sort of start to ascertain, okay, I'll make this up, like, I had a tomato salad for lunch, and then suddenly it fed my baby, you know, maybe, I don't know, later in the afternoon, and they were really unsettled, and then we know that tomatoes aren't, you know, great for kind of a reflux situation, all those kind of things, or, you know, chocolate, or if you're very heavy on dairy, it can then sort of switch things round, and I suppose then you can start to think about what could be causing any kind of issues. I mean, are there kind of major signs of things like a cow's milk allergy, which is probably the first one that crops up, that are distinct from a reflux situation, or is that a difficult one to?
Yeah, definitely. So again, yeah, it's cow's milk protein allergy, is the CMPA is the kind of number one. But for a lot of parents, they struggle to understand why maybe for the first couple of months the baby is actually fine, and then they start to show symptoms. Or if they've been breastfed and suddenly go to formula, then things kick off a little bit, because it's more direct with cow's milk. So it could be more like skin conditions, so patches of eczema, they flare up and they're going to be really red and sore, or it can turn into hives, like little raised bumps on the skin. Nappies, if there's like mucus type substance in the nappy, or really, really foul smelling. I mean, it depends. Obviously, if your mum's eating a lot of different foods and things, that can obviously affect it too, but it can be like really disgusting. Diarrhea as well as constipation. So it can be either or, and sometimes it's both on different days. That's why it's a bit more complicated. And I think just generally unsettled when you hear that baby cry, when it's that pain cry, when it's different to the normal cry, when they just want something, or they want to feed quite a lot to try and kind of almost settle themselves, which in turn then makes it worse almost if mama has eaten something they can't have. So it's just looking at the whole picture and looking at what is different from the norm for your child. Because obviously illnesses and bugs play a part in this. Teething is a nightmare for putting mucus in the nappy because they're dribbling lots. Parents think it's an allergy. So it's just kind of taking everything to account. But I would say kind of one point with the food and symptom diary is that with delayed reactions, which generally with dairy is more of a delayed reaction, it can take up to 3 days for the symptoms to present themselves.
Right.
So it's word as a non-IgE, so it's a non-immediate reaction, and that's where the diary comes into play and be really helpful, because it might be something that mum has eaten, or if the baby's weaning, that they've eaten on Monday and they don't actually react till Wednesday, Thursday. But why? It's not that food from the day, it's from the start of the week. Sure. So that's when the patterns kind of start to emerge, and it's not necessarily a food that's been eaten just before they kick off, or that a symptom starts to flare up. So it's those kind of things to look out for.
Another comment here, saying I'm dairy. It says the same lady you asked about the omeprazole. I'm dairy free already, but breastfed, but my child is 9 months. Almost been trying to wean off the omeprazole, but thinking about maybe trying to stop altogether to see if it helps with the sleep issues. I mean, from a sleep point of view, you'd come off the omeprazole with GP guidance probably, and it's unlikely to be the cause of your distinct sleep issues. It might contribute, but it depends on so much. But I think if you need the omeprazole for a reflux or an allergy, well, it wouldn't be an allergy issue, but you would want to talk to your GP. But I think what you've sort of, you're kind of knowing your child and seeing how they are is the most important thing, because the GPs, even the pediatric consultants, the health visitors, they see a snapshot of what's happening in the day. And who was that? Someone was telling me that they'd videoed their child in distress, and they wanted to show the doctor that, because they weren't presenting the whole time. And it's so important, I think, to try and help yourself have that the correct conversation, isn't it? So I mean,
my babies would turn up to the doctors smiling and laughing, and you're like, what? How can you suddenly be smiling and be okay? And the doctor's like, there's nothing wrong here. Like, you haven't lived with them. So it does make it hard. So having as much evidence as possible, definitely.
Yeah, absolutely. That's great advice about the kind of the CMPA, because I know that, and obviously once you get diagnosed with that, I mean, what does the diagnosis look like in young babies? Do they do things like skin prick test that early, or is it you just sort of have to go on exclusion diet and see if it works?
So it's cutting it out. And it's really important that the paediatricians would want mum to retrial to make sure that it definitely is that, because we don't want to exclude any food that is is not necessary, because also mum then misses out on a lot of, you know, goodness that she needs, especially if breastfeeding. You know, you're missing out on things that you need to have. So it would be the exclusion diet, and they'd say roughly 2 to 4 weeks excluding, and then reintroduce, see if the symptoms flare up again. If they don't, then hopefully everything is fine, or it means it could be something else. But it's the reintroduction is the crucial bit that sometimes gets missed out, and then mums are dairy free for the next 6 months unnecessarily, and that's not really where we want to be at with it. So
no.
Try them.
Yeah, okay, that's kind of interesting as well to see. And so when we get onto the kind of the weaning side of things, so this is where, you know, I've got a kind of a personal interest and sort of fascination. I think I saw something you'd said before about this, but so my daughter, the 11-year-old, she, when we did weaning with her, I gave her some eggs, and like suddenly everything went like bonkers, and you're like, oh my god, like literally panic stations. I mean, on reflection, it wasn't anaphylactic, it was like massive hives and really blotchy, red in the face. But at that moment in time, in my first child, I was just lost in this world of panic. And you know, luckily we kind of gave her the Piriton really quickly, and it calmed down super quick, so the panic kind of dropped. But it's I think it's being aware of those things as you're doing it, as you go along, I suppose, and perhaps having is it right to have, I mean, I'm kind of the sort of person who doesn't like to put too much pressure on or plan too much, but does weaning come with its own watch out for these kind of foods, or is it test it and see, or
it's, I guess it depends on the baby. So it's looking at as I said, the previous history. If there is an allergy already that mum has and dad have diagnosed, or the paediatrician's diagnosed, looking at skin conditions. So if the baby's got really severe eczema and it's having to be controlled with steroids and things, there is a higher chance that that baby will have a reaction to a food as well. The skin is the first barrier, so if that's compromised, then the likelihood of a reaction does increase. But saying that, if the baby doesn't have any of those things, it's still for mum and dad to be aware of what to look out for. And there is, you know, Allergy UK, they do put out a kind of a system of what you introduce first in terms of allergies, allergens, and how to do it in a safe way, so that if there was a reaction, you're able to respond to it as and when you need to. So actually the first allergen to introduce is peanut. Egg and peanut. I should say egg first, then peanut. And then after that, with the allergens, it's really whatever kind of is eaten in the household. So if mum and dad eat a lot of bread, for instance, or pasta, then introduce wheat next. Or if they eat a lot of dairy, then introduce dairy. It's really kind of whatever suits the family. The guidance changed. It used to be quite a long time ago that, you know, in pregnancy mums were told not to eat nuts and not to eat dairy, all these kind of things, which has been turned on its head and shown that actually didn't help whatsoever. And it's the same with weaning, was that you don't give any allergens until after they're 1. Again, with a couple of studies that's changed, and it's advised from 6 months of when we start weaning. So after kind of the first few foods like veggies and some fruits and things, you can then start with the allergens. And ideally those allergens are introduced before the baby turns 1 is the ideal guidance, just because their tolerance levels after that, they're not as good. So if you leave, say, peanuts until after they're 1, there's a higher chance, it doesn't mean to say there will be a chance, but there's a higher chance that child will then react. So try and get them in before they're 1 if possible. But again, that does put pressure on parents to try and get everything in, because it does take time. You know, it's not like you try one food for a day and then move on to the next food another day. It's, you know, each food is for 3 days. It's very small amounts. You build it up. So that takes time. So with, you know, parents, exactly, a lot of effort, a lot of mental effort, emotional effort, because for some it is a little bit scary and daunting. But I think if you've got a systematic approach to it, then you're a bit clearer. You can be a bit calmer about how you're doing it, and, you know, when you're doing it, you then just feel a bit more confident with it. So I think that's definitely the key.
And because you just made me remember thing about, you weren't supposed to give honey until they were over 1. And is that being kind of
No,
changed?
that's still the case.
Oh,
That's
is
still the
it? Oh,
case.
that's
Yeah.
interesting. Right. Okay.
Yeah.
I have to gen up on this stuff. And I suppose whenever I talk to people, especially in a kind of weaning zone, around that sort of 6-ish month mark, as they're starting to introduce new foods, I don't know if I'm right. That's the question, really. You can help me if I understand if I'm doing this properly. But I always sort of say, don't give new foods like late on in the day, just in case, because obviously it can, disrupt. Well, you can have obviously an allergic reaction, but you can also have I suppose, a more internal reaction that might kind of disturb their gut, which could then disturb sleep or nappies, etc. But is the best time of day sort of? I mean, you're not going to give
Morning.
like chicken and nuts for breakfast, but
well, why not? Why not?
Stop.
I think we're so programmed that you eat your porridge for breakfast and you eat your sandwich for lunch and you have a good meal at dinner. But actually, with an allergen, I say morning as early in the day as you possibly can. But I said, it's just to give you the time to look for a reaction. But it's the same for sleep. If there is going to be a reaction, that is going to disturb sleep if you've not given it till later on. And you're not with the child either, no. If they're sleeping in their cot or whatever. So I also suggest that if you are particularly anxious about it, that you try and do it when there's somebody else in the house with you, just so you've got that moral support, somebody that if a reaction did occur, you've got another head to work out what to do, and to help keep each other calm as well, I think. Definitely in the morning, and not when, making sure that when the food's introduced that your child's not teething or they don't have a bug, because their immune system is then compromised. And I'm even getting it with a client that has just started, that their child seems to be reacting to every single food. We know that's probably not the case, but they have been teething and they did have a cold recently. So the immune system's on high alert and the foods are just kind of tipping it over the edge. So it's about getting back to baseline and then doing it with the steps that we've just talked about. Yeah,
absolutely. And I think also something in not doing it when they're tired as well. Because you want to kind of not judge a food. I was sort of getting into kind of eating habits as well, but you don't want to sort of go, well, they turned it away, or because they were grumpy because they were tired. The best time to do it is probably when they're in a good state of tiredness, and then you're not too worried about all of those factors as well. Great. And so the other thing I was always fascinated by with my daughter and her egg allergy is that I was told, oh, she'll grow out of it. I was like, yeah, right. And she did. And I was like, oh, okay. So around about 1, we started introducing like baked egg, and then sort of have migrated to kind of scrambled egg and kind of went on that journey. And I know there's obviously other sort of the CMPA, sort of the milk ladder, but is it the case that it's just some of them, or are there certain allergies that will be grown out of, or is there just a kind of maturing of the digestive system, or does it depend on a child by child basis, or some definite no's to never go?
Well, I think we used to think there were definite no's, but then I put a post out the other day about peanut, and there was a mum on there who said I think her 8-year-old is now growing out of his peanut allergy. So I think it has to go on a child by child basis. For my boys, we were told they grow out of them by 2, by 3, by 5. Like, well, they're 7, nearly 8 now, and we still have. I mean, they're free from dairy, soya, wheat, eggs, coconut, beef, and nuts. And so quite a long list, and they've not grown out of them. So I think there are some that they're more likely to. So like the dairy allergy, children are more likely to grow out of that by the time they turn 1. Which is why then we're introducing the milk ladder if they've had a reaction before, that it's you either do it within 6 months after the last reaction or by the time they're 1.
Right.
To retest that one. So peanut, egg, less likely to, but as I said, some do. It depends on the reaction as well. If it's an immediate reaction versus a delayed reaction, it's just, they don't really know a lot of it. There's still so much more studies that need to be done, I think, to find out. And unfortunately, it seems more and more children are suffering with reactions. And I think there's a study being done over in Australia for blood tests and things like that to make them a lot more accurate, which is not, again, results won't come out for a couple of years yet, but it's just a slow process. And unfortunately, that then means that a lot of it comes down to the parents and how they deal with it.
And it's, I mean, I keep talking about my daughter, but it's sort of just sharing experience now, because she's having, you know, some tummy issues, and so we're on this kind of journey of well, an exclusion diet and keeping an eye on what she's eating. But she's 11 and she can like not want, like any child, she can sometimes not want to eat what's put in front of her. And so how you kind of create this sort of baseline of what she's eating and then test it, it's, you know, it can be really hard to get that kind of data and understand. And it takes time, unfortunately, doesn't it, as well? But I suppose what is good about you know, the way that I suppose our society has evolved, and I've been gluten-free myself for 9 years, and I went dairy-free, and this is a thyroid issue, not an allergy thing. And I've just seen the amount of stuff that's out there for people. So if you are in that situation and, you know, you're having to alternate your child's diet, there's so much more now, isn't there, that can be bought and adapted and used. So it doesn't have to be you know, the stressful diagnosis and a label, and it's harder, obviously much harder, but it's all possible, I'm sure. Do you find that with your boys when you're trying to feed them and eat out and stuff like that, or is that more tricky being outside?
Yeah, I mean, I'm that parent who's got a rucksack full of snacks and meals wherever we go. Which actually, being in lockdown, I was like, oh, we're the same as everybody else now, because everyone's having to do it. Yeah, I think, you know, eating out and things, it's just about being prepared and checking and asking and communicating as clearly as possible. Yeah. And you know, I'm actually writing a post for tonight that's kind of along these lines, but for a lot of people, the understanding is not really there about the implications of an allergy, or the fear sets in. So for instance, in a cafe or a restaurant, and you say to the waiter or the waitress that there's an allergy here, and they suddenly go, oh, I don't want to deal with you, can you please either leave, or I don't know how to deal with this. And so, you know, I think when I first started out with this, I was very sensitive to the fact that if people rolled their eyes at me, or, you know, you felt like a burden because you're having to ask for extra things. And it's really tricky eating out, and you also want your child to be safe. So I would phone up ahead, or I'd look online at the menus. I would then phone up and ask to speak to the manager, and we would come up with, you know, generally I try and get them to come up with a meal there and then that the chef can cook, or is there something that's, you know, safe for my child. And then when you get there, again, we're allowed in cafes now, which is so exciting, but being able to go in and saying to them, look, I spoke to your manager, or this is what's going on, please can you check with them, and then double check what they've written down, because there's so many times where I've said something to the staff and they haven't written it down. And so like a baked potato has turned up with butter and cheese on it when I've asked for no dairy. I just wanted baked beans, you know, things, simple things like that, but I have to send it back, and they're like, oh, you have to send it back, you know. But it just becomes something that you just do every single day, and it becomes your normal life. It's habit, and it's checking and checking and checking again. So for instance, in the supermarket, foods that you might have brought for the last 6 months have been absolutely safe. I still check them, and I check them when I get home again, because ingredients do change and they don't always put it on the packaging. So it's just, I think, as you said, making it a habit so that then doesn't consume you completely. Because in the start it is, you know, you're in the supermarket, and, you know, at the start I was there with tears streaming down my face, because I think I don't know what to feed my child, I don't know how to read these labels, I don't know what to look for. And I mean, now I can scan them pretty quickly. I'm fairly apt at it. It's been nearly 8 years, so it's normal. But and also learning to cook, you know, being able to cook simple things from scratch so that you know exactly what goes into the food, knowing which cafes to go to that are safe, or which restaurants are good, and then just making around that. So you can still lead a normal life. You just need to be prepared. And
I think you're right. Yeah, you just made me remember. I'm a big fan of a snack, and like I said, I'm not allergic to the gluten, but I avoid it, you know, in everything that I eat. And so Tesco, like Tesco bacon crunchies used to be gluten-free, so I used to buy them because they were cheaper than, you know, the gluten-free version. And suddenly they started putting wheat in them, and I'm like, when does this happen, and why? And it's just like so frustrating. So, but then we found Tesco like free from onion rings, amazing. I can highly recommend them, and they are dairy free and they are wheat free as well. But at the weekend we were in East Kent, and I was like, well, we need to get something to eat, and it's always very hard when you're trying to quickly find something for me. I'm talking about myself, not being selfish, but I found this amazing fish and chip shop that had a completely separate gluten-free fryer, and I was like, oh my god, this is like heaven.
You're like a child, aren't you? Like,
and I would never normally eat it. I was like, I have to. I don't care about any sort of diet. I need to have my gluten-free fix, and it was awesome. So when you find places like that you can rely on, you know you want to go back, and I think all credit to them for doing it. Versus another experience I had last week where I had to sign a disclaimer for my food because it was a pub. We were sat outside, and I had to say I was okay. That I'd read the menu and they'd offered me the gluten-free options, which were basically chips. And I was like, wow. And they wouldn't serve me until I'd signed it as that. And that's them, you know, covering their backside.
There you go. Responsibility on you.
So it is hard, but you do get it. So I won't go back to that pub again, but I'll definitely go back to that gluten-free fish and chip shop, Beach Boys it was called, in Margate. I recommend it to everyone.
That's a great name as well.
yeah, it's awesome. Oh, brilliant. Well, this has been really interesting, and it's like it's so fascinating on that kind of journey from, you know, from the babies up until the older kids as well. And I think that if anything is my takeaway from it, there's a lot to it, and I think you just got to know what's, you know, your child is showing you, and watch them as you do, you know, inevitably, and respond, take notes, talk to health professionals, reach out, you know, you're there, and you're there to support people. So how can people get in touch with you, and what sort of services do you offer? Do you want to let us know?
So obviously on Instagram, the Allergy Health Coach, and I've got links on there as well to various things if people are interested. I've got a website, theallergyhealthcoach.com, and I guess the main things I offer at the moment is my online coaching. I've got various packages. I've been trying to make it as flexible and as achievable for everybody as possible. So some of my coaching is just that it's a 1 hour phone call, and in that phone call we put together a bit of a plan for the parents, or it's an empowering strategy session, so a half-hour call but 2 weeks of messaging support, or there's another one that's a half-hour call with 4 weeks messaging support. And then my guidance academy, so that's 4 calls within 2 months and messaging support for that whole 2-month period, which I've just actually today finished with a mum who's been with me for the last 2 months. And the difference in her, honestly, I was so proud looking at her. The confidence in her has just shot up. She's had some pretty horrific reactions with her poor little girl. But the change in her has been amazing, and she's eating so much more food. And I think just having that ongoing support for her has been perfect. So hopefully it's something there for everybody. I also, for people to kind of find out a bit more, I offer a free 20-minute discovery call to find out, mainly to find out if I can help, because I will always be absolutely honest. If something's out of my remit, I will say, and I'll try and offer some alternatives for people to go and get support elsewhere. And to see if we get on well, and I think it's an important thing that we form a relationship, because the parents are going to be telling me a lot of their innermost thoughts probably, and their worries, so it's important that we can get on. So that's there for that reason. I've just launched a survival bundle, the Allergy Survival Bundle. So again, I'm trying to think of different ways to support parents as best I can, and this survival bundle is made up of 9 PDF kind of information packs. There's one actually in weaning. There's the food and symptom diary template. There's how to approach going to doctor's appointments, family recipe section, birthday party ideas. Just trying to kind of cover everything that the parents might need to know, and what is a reaction and symptoms and things like that. What else is in there? There's 4 live webinars that I'll be going through different topics for that, and there's also an MP3 empowerment track that you get to hear my lovely soothing voice from my hypnobirthing days, and it's just really trying to give parents that 10 minutes of them time when it's all getting a bit much, just kind of reiterating what they're doing is a great job. And I put all of that into this bundle excuse me, and the webinars will be starting a week on Monday. Drink some water, sorry. So there's kind of lots of bonuses if parents buy this before the webinars start. You know, if there's any updates that need to be done to the PDFs, I'll be doing that for life, for free of charge. There's a discount, so it's only £27 just now instead of £47. Webinars, you can ask questions at the end, and that can take as long as the questions need to take. What else have we got? And they'll be entered into a prize draw for a free 30-minute coaching session as well. So there's kind of lots of extra things in there for parents, really to try and give them that starter pack to, you know, help their confidence and get them going. So there's a link in my bio for that if they're interested in that as well.
Great, I'll share that as well. So fab.
Thank you.
It's nice to have those different options. I think when I started out as well, a lot of people were just doing one package, and you know, or maybe a couple. And I think everyone's got different, you know, issues. Everyone's got different price points, so it's lovely to have those sort of options. So fab. Well, thank you very much for joining me this afternoon. It's been lovely to chat, and I'll save all this down and share it so that people can watch it on replay. Great. But
thank you so much for having me. It's been nice to chat.
Great.
And if anyone's got any issues that in your followers, if they want to ask a question, please get in touch. I'm more than happy to help in any way I can.
Lovely. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Kate. See you soon. Bye-bye.
Bye.